Hi, this is Usha. Welcome to Rathod Science classes. Today in this lecture, we are going to discuss current affairs of 31st August 2021. In this lecture, we are going to discuss 9 topics which are very much relevant to UPSC. So let's get started with our discussion and let us see the list of the items we are going to discuss in this lecture. So first topic we are going to talk about, that is health staff vaccination. So 25% of vaccinated health staff contracted COVID-19. So this is study, okay. So we are going to study what are the highlights of that report which is given by that study, and that will be important from GS paper 2 under health. And next one, it is about Tokyo Paralympics. Okay, so actually till recently we studied about Olympics. So in Olympics we got many medals. For the first time we got highest number of medals in this year Olympics, which held in Tokyo. So after Olympics we are having this Paralympics, but many people they don't know about this Paralympics. So this Paralympics mainly conducted for disabled people. So here in this Paralympics also India got many medals. Okay, so we are going to focus on not like how many medals we got and who got these medals, but we are going to see some facts regarding this, what is this Paralympics. So as an UPSC aspirant you need to know that. And next one is Pashmina shawls. So actually this Pashmina shawls are very much costly, and even you can see about the cost, it will be like more than 50,000. okay. So actually why these are very much special, because so this wool which is mainly used to make this shawl, it is mainly get from a certain type of sheep, okay, which mainly seen in Kashmir. And one more thing is, so on these shawls, so there will be handmade embroidery, okay. So for that this is very much cost, okay. And here recently there are some steps which are taken mainly to promote this Pashmina shawls. So this will be important from our art and culture, which comes under GS paper 3. And next one, it is about China came with a rule on online games. So I was very much interested here because many students and especially many children, they are addicted to playing online games. For example, Free Fire, etc. right? So here Chinese government came up with some rules regarding curtailing of playing of online games by children, and this type of the steps which are very much urgently needed in all the countries, not only in China, because due to this COVID-19 pandemic there is schools or schools have been shut down since 1.5 years, that is from March 2020 onwards. So till that time there is no proper education. So if there is an online education also, children are not much interested, and it is not productive also, even according to my view as I saw practically. And the next one here is so children, they mainly attracted towards the smartphones. So due to this online learning, parents they gifted phones, tablets for children. But here to listen just 1.5 to 2 hours of class, so we gave freedom to children, right? They are having now smartphones along with internet, right? So because of this they have been addicted to playing these online games. So due to this playing of online games, so the interest in education also had been decreased, and there were some problems which are mainly facing by children now, that is eyesight problems also, because of continuously seeing the mobile screen. So this type of rules will be very much helpful, mainly to make children discipline, and also to make children to focus on other physical activities or other some educational, some curriculum activities, and even that will be helpful for health of children also. And this article will be important from international relations, which comes in the GS paper too, and we can take some guidelines and we can also incorporate in India. So this is the one thing I want to say. And next one is North Korea nuclear developments. So actually North Korea, it is mainly famous for nuclear developments, right? So in this context we need to know history of nuclear developments between USA and North Korea. So that will be important from our international relations point of view, which comes in the GS paper too. And the next topic we are going to discuss, it is about COVID-19 vaccination. And next one is about marital rape. So in yesterday's lecture we studied one article regarding women discrimination. So in that article also I said about one point regarding this marital rape. So here in this lecture we are going to discuss in detail regarding this marital rape, which will be very much important from our society social issues point of view, which comes in the GS paper 2 and even polity and governance. And next topic we are going to discuss about nationally determined contributions. So if you have gone through or if you know about this Paris climate deal, so in that Paris climate deal mainly to achieve the goals, okay, so we came with this nationally determined contributions. Every country need to come up with this nationally determined contributions, and we are going to analyze so whether those countries which come up with this nationally determined contributions, they have been achieved or not. So this will be important from our environment and ecology, and which mainly comes under GS paper 3. And next topic we are going to discuss, it is about national monetization pipeline. So actually we are discussing this topic from last 4 days. So again we are going to see some brief details which are given in this article, which are new things. So these are some important topics we are going to discuss in this lecture. So let's get started with our discussion and let us see the first topic now. Title says 25% of vaccinated health staff contracted COVID-19. So it is according to study. Okay, so recently CSIR came with study and it came up with some key highlights regarding vaccination. So this article will be important regarding our health, which comes under GS paper 2. And now let us try to talk about this topic in a very great detail. So if you see context, it mainly says that, so here recently study which mainly done by CSIR. It mainly says that it is an indicator that 25% of vaccinated health staff, they contracted this COVID-19. So it is a one of indicator which mainly says that there is diminishing role of vaccines in preventing transmission of this coronavirus. Okay, so there is a diminishing role, that is we cannot see any role of vaccines in preventing transmission of this coronavirus. So 25% of health staff contracted COVID-19. So a little over 25% of fully vaccinated health workers of Delhi hospital, okay, contracted a fresh or a breakthrough. So that means 25%. Okay, so in hospital, in Delhi hospital, about 25% of staff, okay, who are already completely vaccinated, okay, that is 2 doses of vaccine, though they have been contracted a fresh or a break, that means they got infections. So if you are talking about details, this study involved health care workers at Max group of hospitals in Delhi and Gurugram. So in Delhi and Gurugram, there was a study which conducted, and this study mainly involved health care workers at especially Max group of hospitals, and this study led by scientists from CSIR in Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. CSIR IGB conducted this study. So it mainly says that about half of recipients had been previously infected with this SARS coronavirus 2. If you see this infographic, it mainly says that it is talking about percentage of doses brought by private hospitals. So if we are talking about percentage of doses which brought by private hospitals, so in 12 states and union territories, so 12 states and union territories, the share of the supplied doses which mainly availed by private hospitals, which is less than 2%. Okay, so if you are talking about private hospitals which are mainly giving vaccines, it is less than 2%. So this map, okay, this map mainly depicts the share of doses which mainly brought up by private hospitals since May. Okay, so here in this green areas in Karnataka and as well as Telangana, so there is more than 25%. Okay, and if you are talking about this maroon color areas, we can see there is less than 2%, and this yellow color areas, they went for 4 to 25% of vaccines. Okay, so if you are talking about background, so recently our government came with the revised guidelines regarding this vaccination. So it came up in June 2021. So here in this guideline, center said that it will procure 75% of vaccines which are mainly produced by manufacturers, and remaining 25% of vaccines which from manufacturers, they can directly sold to private hospitals. Okay, so here if you see the percentage of vaccines are provided by private hospitals, is very low. So now let us try to see some facts regarding this CSIR. So if we are talking about the CSIR, it is an autonomous body and the largest research development organization in India. And here this CSIR mainly running 37 laboratories and also 39 field stations or extension centers. So it is mainly funded by Ministry of Science and Technology. And here this CSIR, which is an autonomous body which mainly operates as an autonomous body which mainly comes under which act, that is Registration of Societies Act of 1860. And here the research and development activities of this CSIR includes aerospace engineering, structural engineering, oceanic sciences, life sciences, metallurgy, chemistry, chemicals and mining, food, petroleum, leather and environment. So in all these areas it mainly conducts research and development. So this is about this topic, and now let us move on to next topic. Title says Avani Sumit lead India's gold hunt at Tokyo Paralympics. So in this Paralympics we got 2 gold medals, 4 silver medal and 1 bronze. It is kitty till now. Okay. So in this Paralympics also we secured about 7 medals. Okay. So this article, it is very important from sports point of view, but you need to know some facts regarding what is Paralympics. So how it is different from this Olympics. So if we're talking about context, as we know, as I said, like, so we got a good number of medals in this Paralympics in Tokyo. So if we're talking about this 2020 Summer Paralympics, so it is a mainly branded as Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games, and they are mainly major international multi-sport para sports event, and this game mainly governed by IPC, International Paralympic Committee, and this year it mainly marks 68th Summer Paralympic Games, and here mainly scheduled from August 24th and it will conclude on September 5th 2021. So these are some important facts regarding this Paralympics. And now let us try to focus on some important facts regarding this IPC, International Paralympic Committee. So here if you are talking about this IPC, it is an international non-profit organization. You have to remember it is International Non-Profit Organization, that is NPO, and it is a governing body for this Paralympic movement. And here this IPC mainly organizes Paralympic Games and functions as an international federation for 9 sports. Okay, and it mainly was established on September 22, 1989. And here this organization mainly works for mission of enabling Paralympic athletes to achieve sporting excellence and also inspiring and exciting the world. Okay, so it mainly comprises of representatives from 176 national Paralympic committees, and there are 4 international organizations of the sport, especially for disabled. Okay, so this is conducted for disabled people, and headquarters it is located in Bonn, Germany. So these are some important things that you need to remember. Now let us try to talk about next topic, that is 102 Vande Bharat trains to be operational by 2024. So it is talking about Vande Bharat trains. So if I say Vande Bharat, one thing that you need to come into your mind. So one concept that you need to get here is made in India. Okay. So it is mainly related to made in India. So here now let us try to see, or make in India. So now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. So this will be important regarding GS paper 2. So now let us try to see context. If you see context, it mainly says that railways mainly plans to operate 102 Vande Bharat trains by March 2021. So by March 24. So by March 2024, our railways it is planning to operate 102 Vande Bharat trains. So now let us try to see some important details. If you see details, it mainly says that railway officials says that 102 Vande Bharat trains that need to be commissioned by early 2024, and the train 18, which mainly named, okay, later named as Vande Bharat Express, which was rolled out by Integral Coach Factory Chennai. So this train 18, after this it also named as this Vande Bharat Express, which was mainly rolled out by Integral Coach Factory Chennai. So here in this context, it also showcased India's first India's first high-speed train, first semi-high-speed train, which made operational efficiency of about 160 kmph, that is kilometers per hour. So it will travel with a speed of 160 kilometers per hour, and it is a game changer. So if you're talking about some facts regarding this Vande Bharat Express, so it is India's first indigenously built engineless semi-high speed train. Okay, so it is India's first indigenously built engineless semi-high speed train. So earlier it was known with a name, that is Train 18. So now it is called as Vande Bharat Express, and this express mainly runs between Delhi and Varanasi, and maximum speed here is 160 kmph, that is 160 kilometers per hour, and it mainly built by Integral Coach Factory, Chennai. And the train, which is mainly made in India, that is indigenously built, and about 100% is Make in India project. And next one is the energy efficient, as its coaches will be fitted with LED lights. So here in this coaches, they mainly fitted with LED lights, and coaches, they have automatic doors and as well as recreatable footsteps. So here they will be very much energy efficient, and also it will be interconnected with fully sealed gangways along with a GPS based passenger information system, and also provided with bio toilets. So these are some advantages or some advantages we can see in this railways. And now let us try to see the features of this Train 18. So if we are talking about important features of Train 18, so train is capable of running with a maximum speed. So maximum speed is 200 kilometers per hour. Okay. And the next one is the tracks on which it operates, they are not capable of supporting such high speeds. So till now, whatever the trains are running on existing tracks, so they are not much speed efficient. So when you want to go for run a trains of this much speed, which is of high speed, so here we need to go for laying of tracks also. So what happened? Which are the tracks now we are present? So they are mainly suitable for operating maximum speed of about 130 kilometers per hour, but not 160 or 200. So it was tested with a speed of 180 kilometers per hour, and because of this it makes highest train to run in India. Okay, fastest train to run in India. So one question I want to ask you here. So before this Train 18, which is a train which is having maximum speed in India? So let me know name of that train in comment box. And now let us try to see next topic, that is about new initiative in Jammu and Kashmir to restore lost glory for Pashmina shawls. Okay, Pashmina shawls. So here you need to focus on this Pashmina shawls. So if you are reading NCERT geography, you will also come across this Pashmina shawls somewhere for sure. Okay, so I am not exactly sure in which book you will get about this topic, but there are, I think so, one paragraph which is mainly dedicated to this Pashmina shawls in your geography NCERT. So if you have completed that, then you can recall those things. So this article will be important regarding geography and as well as from art and culture point of view. So from geography you need to know about this Pashmina goats, so where they present, and okay, and here art and culture you need to know about art on this Pashmina shawls. So this article, it is very much important from your prelims point of view. So if you are talking about context, so the number of women, okay, if you see this image, then you can understand women, they are mainly doing some hand embroidery on these shawls. So the number of women associated with hand spinning of yarns for this Pashmina shawls, they decreased significantly. So there is a decreasing of number of women who are associated with hand spinning or stitching or embroidery work. So regarding this, a rare initiative which was came up. Okay, so in this rare initiative they are going to double. Okay, they are going to double the wages, and they are going to ensure work which is present around the year. That means throughout the year they will get some work. So whenever we are taking these steps, that will be helpful for employment generation, and also that will be helpful for saving or preservation of our art, and even that will be helpful for re-engagement of women artisans. Okay, in this production of worldwide famous handmade shawls. So this is about context. And now let us try to see some important details. So if you see details, the Center for Excellence, okay, Center for Excellence, mainly to restore the lost hand-driven process. So here we are mainly losing this hand-driven process. So in this hand-driven process, in this handmade embroidery, so there is intricate shawl weaving industry. So here mainly to restore this process of hand-driven embroidery. So in this intricate shawl weaving industry, CFE mainly came up with some initiatives like doubling the wages of women from rupee 1 rupee knot of 10 threads with a 10-inch long yarn to 2 rupees. So there is almost doubling. And if you are talking about some data, it mainly says that according to one estimates, women participation in shawl weaving has come down significantly. So according to one estimate, it mainly says that women participation in this shawl weaving, which has been come down significantly from 1 lakh to just around 10,000. So earlier there were 1 lakh people, they used to do this work. Now just 10,000 people, they are doing this work in this Kashmir valley. So because of this, because of decreasing the number of women who engaged in this work, then what happened, it will be also having impact on process which is involved in this handmade shawls, like sorting the wool, dusting the wool, and as well as dehairing, combining, spinning, and as well as finishing, etc. So in these areas there will be the female workforce, this work which is mainly dominated by female. So because of decrease in the women who are participating in this, then that led to decrease in the production also. So now let us try to see some important significance. So why, how this step will be very much useful. So if we are talking about significance, it mainly says that, so the move which is likely to generate employment, that will increase employment opportunities, and this will also improve economic prospects of women weavers. So here in this way, these steps are very much important. And next one is, if you are talking about some facts regarding this Pashmina goat, so it is a special breed of goat which is indigenous and which mainly seen in high altitude regions of Ladakh in Jammu and Kashmir. So Ladakh in Jammu and Kashmir, we can see this special breed of goat. And next one is, they are mainly raised for ultra fine cashmere wool, which is known as Pashmina. Okay, Pashmina. And next one is, the goats are generally domesticated and reared by nomadic communities. So those communities are called as Changpa. Okay. So Changtang region of Greater Ladakh, which is very much famous for this Pashmina goats. And these Changtangi goats have revitalized the economy of this Changdang Leh and as well as Ladakh region. So because of this, whatever the wool we are getting this from this Pashmina goat, it is very, very costly. So because of this, so here these goats, they have revitalized the economy of this people. So this is gist of this topic. And now let us try to see next topic. Title says, China cuts time minors can spend on online games. So it is mainly talking about time that can be spent by minors on this online games. So this article will be important from GS paper to under international relations. Now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. If you say context, it mainly says that Chinese regulator, they slashed the amount of time players under the age of 18. So under the age of 18, so children, how much amount they need to play games. So they can spend on online games to an hour, that is between 8 p.m. till 9 p.m. on Fridays, weekends and holidays. So they can spend online games to an hour of a gameplay on Fridays, weekends and holidays. So that is in response to growing concern over gaming addiction. So according to this state media report, which mainly says that, so children, they are mainly addicted to this online games. So because of this, Chinese regulators, they came with some rules. It mainly says that children, they can play this online game between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on especially some days like Fridays, weekends and holidays. So this is context. And if you are talking about some important details, it mainly says that rules published by National Press and Publication Administration, they mainly said that users under the age of 18, okay, users under age 18, so they will be only able to play games between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. So between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. they can play games, okay, that too online games. And next one is this online gaming companies, they will be barred from providing gaming services to them from outside these hours. That means outside this 8 to 9 p.m. here, which are the online gaming companies, online gaming platforms are there, so they are mainly barred. That means they should not provide any games at that beyond that time, that is between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. they should provide only gaming between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. So here these are the steps are taken by China to mainly to ensure that they have put a real name, they have mainly come up with curbing of this online gaming, okay, and to reduce the impact of this online gaming on these children. And here in this context, Chinese authorities also said that here these gaming companies, they need to put a real name verification systems. Okay, and now let us move on to next important thing. So it is not for the first time China came up with these rules. Actually, previously China limited the total length of time minors they could access this online games to 3 hours. Okay, so here earlier also Chinese came up with this type of rules. It mainly says that it will be limited to 3 hours on holidays and 1.5 hours on other days, and now it decreased to just 1 hour. So if I talk about what will be the impact, so first and the foremost thing you need to remember here is, so these new rules come amid a broad crackdown by Beijing on this Chinese technology giants. So it will lead to some effect on Chinese technological giants. That means the companies which are providing these gaming services, they include Alibaba Group and as well as Tencent Holdings, etc. And this step will also have an effect on investors also. And also they will have some hammering Chinese shares traded at the home and as well as trade. So even there will be some effect on Chinese shares also. So this will be impact. And now let's try to see next article. Title says North Korea may have restarted nuclear reactor, IAEA. So this article mainly says that North Korea may have, there is some doubt regarding whether this North Korea started or restarted this nuclear reactor. So this article will be important regarding international relations, and I am going to discuss number of details in this topic now. So if you see context, it mainly says that nuclear armed North Korea. So now North Korea, already we know that they are having nuclear, okay, nuclear things, and even under FATF list, so North Korea, which is mainly present in blacklist. So here this North Korea appears to have restarted plutonium producing reprocessing reactor. So whenever it is going for reopening of this plutonium producing reactor, then what happened, it is one of deep concerns or deep troubling development also. So this is the thing which mainly said by United Nations Atomic Energy, that is IAEA. So now let us try to talk about some important details. So if you see here the development of 5 megawatt reactor in this Yongbyon, North Korea's main nuclear complex. So in this North Korea's main nuclear complex here, Yongbyon, okay, Yongbyon, it is one of the main nuclear complex which is mainly developed. It is a 5 megawatt reactor. So this mainly comes with nuclear talks between Pyongyang and Washington. They are at standstill. So between here, North Korea as well as USA, there were some talks regarding to stop this nuclear development which is mainly threatening USA. So here, if you are talking about this context, so North Korean leader offered to dismantle part of this Yongbyon complex at the second summit with the US. And now here President Donald, the earlier president, that is not now, so President Donald Trump, that is the then President Donald Trump, that is he is a ex-president now, right? So ex-president of US, he said that we are going to have some exchange of sanction relief when we are going for dismantling of this Yongbyon complex. But these talks mainly they were rejected. So if you are talking about some more details, North Korea, which is under multiple sets of international sanctions over its nuclear weapons and as well as ballistic missile programs. So it is one of important cause of concern. So if we are talking about or looking regarding this North Korea, we are having North Korea here. Here we have South Korea and here we have China, and even this part is sharing boundary with Russia also. So here we have this 38th parallel. So here we have this demilitarization zone between North Korea and as well as South Korea. So here we have Japan Sea, and here we have South China Sea. So these are some important things that you need to remember. And now let's try to focus on history regarding US and North Korea nuclear policy. So this North Korea has remained an unresolved foreign policy puzzle. So North Korea remained as an unresolved foreign policy puzzle for all post-war American presidents. So after post-war American presidents, so this became one of the challenging things, and this issue had been unresolved. And in recent times, US presidents, they have shown a willingness to diplomatically engage with Pyongyang. So even in real times here, US presidents, they have been willing mainly to diplomatically engage with this North Korea. And here this Clinton administration also signed a framework of agreement with Pyongyang to halt, Pyongyang mainly to halt nuclear production actually. And here later on Obama came into power. Obama had also initiated the talks with North Korea in year 2012, and here it mainly collapsed after Pyongyang launched a satellite. And this one is Mr. Trump also tried to alter his predecessor in North Korea policy here, mainly by reaching out regime and meeting its leader, that is Kim Jong-un thrice, but it was a breakthrough. And next one is, in theory, the Trump administration Korea had also agreed to complete this denuclearization of Korean peninsula, but it also failed. So now let's try to talk about some facts regarding this IAEA, that is International Atomic Energy Agency. So from this area you can expect prelims questions. So if you're talking about this International Atomic Energy Agency, it is mainly widely known as World's Atoms for Peace and Development, and the organization within the United Nations family. The IAEA is International Center for Cooperation in Nuclear Field. So this IAEA, it is a world's atoms for peace and development, and it mainly focuses on International Center for Cooperation area of nuclear field. And here this IAEA created in year 1957, and it mainly created in response to the deep fears and also expectations which are mainly generated by discoveries, diverse users, and as well as nuclear technology. So in this context, this IAEA is very important, and this agency which mainly work with its member states and also multiple partners worldwide. So it will be helpful mainly to promote safe, secure, and as well as peaceful use of nuclear technologies. And if you are talking about functioning, so it is an independent international organization. So here this IAEA is independent international organization, and this organization mainly reports annually to United Nations General Assembly, that is UNGA. And here this IAEA also reports to United Nations Security Council, mainly in regards to if any member of this had been violating or have been non-compliant with safeguards and as well as security obligations. So these are some important facts regarding this IAEA. I hope this article is very clear. And now let us try to see next article. Title says the Vaccine Last Mile Program. So if you see this article which is talking about vaccination, it is for sure. And if you see central theme is mainly says that in vaccination programs with delicate delivery requirements with a last mile means make the rule or break. So in this vaccination program, so exactly we are going for this vaccination programs, right? So in this vaccination programs, we need to focus on delivery requirements, and we need to focus on what are the challenges. So here how we can overcome these challenges. So this is very much important to make this vaccination drive successful. So this is about this topic. And now let us try to see in detail. So as I said earlier, so central theme mainly says that in vaccination programs with delicate delivery requirements, the last mile means make or break. So we need to focus on this last mile. So as you all know, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, that increased or that raised inequalities. So due to this COVID-19 pandemic, that led to inequalities of our world. So if you're talking about local level, if you're talking about district level, if you're talking about throughout the nation level, and if you're comparing with one nation to another nation, throughout the world we are seeing there is increase in inequalities. For example, I will give you some examples. So if you're talking about education, urban people, they have access to technology but not rural people. So that led to increase in digital divide. And the next one is if you're talking about health. So urban people, they are having good facilities to access to healthcare, but what about these rural people? And if you're talking about so and so state, so in so and so state we are having good health facilities than compared to other states, right? So in this way also we are seeing there is inequality. So not only here and there, but throughout the world we are seeing there is rise of inequalities due to this COVID-19 pandemic. For example, some countries, they are having good health infrastructure, and some countries they will be having a large number of doctors, like example Cuba. And also some countries, they are having some good technologies. They went for development of vaccines, right? For example, Pfizer vaccine, for example Sputnik vaccine. So not all the countries, they had vaccination technology, right? So due to this, I can say this COVID-19 has exposed or increased vast inequalities of our world, and against the backdrop of vaccine nationalism. So vaccine nationalism means, so here if there is any manufacturing companies present and they got some technology and they started producing vaccines, then the government of that state, they will go and they will reach this company and they will say that we need so and so a number of vaccines and we are reserving those vaccines especially for that country. Then that is called as vaccine nationalism. So because of this vaccine nationalism, so there is decrease in access of vaccine for other poor countries. So this is also leading to inequality. And if you're talking about background, so vaccines were developed and approved at record speed. Okay, so actually within 2 years, not even 2 years, within 1 year we got with this vaccines. That means, so we strive a lot, right? So because of this coronavirus which entered into our lives, so to save from this coronavirus we want vaccines for sure. So we do not have a proper medicine, so vaccine is a one of preventive care that we can take to limit or to reduce or to prevent transmission of this coronavirus. So in this production of vaccines they were developed and are approved at a record speed, right? So in the same way we need to have that same spirit, mainly spirit of partnerships to vaccinate whole the world. So this is one of important thing that we need to focus in this situation. And if you're talking about need, what can be done? So we need to share technology, we need to share the doses, we need to export the doses, and we must also focus on communities who are most left behind. For example, if the people who are living in a rugged topography, we do not have proper access like roadways, railways and as well as airways. So in that people, they are mainly excluded. For example, we can say number of scheduled tribes people. So here we need to focus on those people first of all, because if you're talking about scheduled tribes, already their population is very low, and if you're talking about particularly vulnerable tribal group people, so if they are getting coronavirus, means that will be easily transmitted to all those people and that will lead to wiping out of that society. So here we need to also focus on this last mile connectivity. So this is some important thing that you need to remember. And if you're talking about challenges regarding this vaccination, so there is no proper cold chain delivery requirements. There is no proper cold chain. So as you all know, these vaccines that can be stored in a low temperature. And if we want to transport these vaccines from one place to another place, so we need to maintain proper temperature, right? So we are mainly lacking this cold chain delivery system. And next one is, so combination of port transport infrastructure and even there is no reliable access to electricity to store vaccines. So it is a one of cause of concern. And next one is, in India we are having a high daylight temperatures. So we need to maintain a proper temperature for storage of these vaccines. So these are some important challenges. So what will be the long-term results when we overcome this challenge? So if infrastructure for vaccination clinics it is created in a sustainable way, that will also used, okay, in our future also, that will also will serve communities in our future, not only in this COVID-19 period. And next one is to tackle this vaccine inequality and to build foundations for more inclusive, resilient and sustainable health system across the world. So it is also one important thing that we need to focus on. So this is gist of this topic, and I hope it is clear. Now let us move on to next topic, that is marital rape and indignity to women. So this article mainly focusing on social issues, that is women related issue, and this topic will be exclusively important from mains from GS paper 2 point of view. So if you are talking about central theme, it mainly says that the marital rape exception is antithetical to women's dignity, equality and autonomy. So because of this, there is one section, section 375 of Indian Penal Code. So in that subsections 2, okay, section 375 subclass 2, which mainly talks about exception of this marital rape. So because of this section, so it is mainly leading to discrimination of women. So there is discrimination of women, like women's dignity and even equality and even autonomy of their bodies. Okay, so now let us try to understand first of all marital rape, and we are going to see some constitutional provisions in India, and we are going to see why it is in news now, and as well as why it is not a crime. So why people are saying that it is not a crime. So first let us try to see what is this marital rape. So marital rape means, I can say, unwanted sex act or sexual acts, okay, by spouse or ex-spouse committed without any consent or against person's will, or obtained by force or threat of force, intimidation, okay, or when person is unable to give consent. So for example, if there is any married couple, so that woman, she is not interested in that sexual activity, means her husband, which is who is mainly forcing her, okay, or even her husband or her ex-husband, okay, and also they are mainly involving in this act without consent of women, and which is against the will of that woman, and it may be done by using some force, by beating her, by doing some violent activities, and also by a threat of force or blackmailing and even intimidation, and whenever the person which in a condition she may not give consent. So these mainly things which comes under this marital rape. So marital rape is any unwanted sexual acts by a spouse or ex-spouse committed without consent. You have to remember, it is mainly done without consent or against the will of person, or by force or by a threat of force, intimidation, and whenever person is unable to give consent. So this is about marital rape. And if you're talking about context, why it is in news, because recently in High Court of Chhattisgarh, so High Court of Chhattisgarh decided a criminal revision petition challenging charges framed against the applicant husband, okay. So recently one petition mainly filed challenging the charges which are mainly framed against applicant husband. So in this context here, based on allegations which are made of his wife, so charges are framed in a trial court under section 376, which mainly talks about rape. Section 377 talks about carnal intercourse against the order of nature. That means except vaginal intercourse, there will be some types of intercourse that can be done. So regarding that, and next one is section 498A, okay, that is about cruelty towards wife by husband or his relatives, okay, regarding this IPC. So under these sections, so charges were be framed, and later on what happened, High Court upheld. High Court said that yes, this section 498A is okay and section 377 is okay, okay, and but this husband mainly discharged under this section 376, okay, under mainly exception under this section 375 subclass 2. Section 375 subclass 2 of IPC mainly says that, so if anything is done, okay, under this definition of rape, so sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife, whether the consent given or consent which is not given, that will not amount to offense of rape. That is mainly present in this section 375 subclass 2. It is mainly talking about exception for this marital rape. So if you are talking about marital rape and Constitution of India, so we are having Article 21 which mainly talks about right to life. So the judicial interpretations has been expanded the scope of Article 21 of our Indian Constitution, so which mainly bounds and leaps regarding this right to life with human dignity. Okay, so we are having a right, women having a right of Article 21. It is a fundamental right in our part 3 of our Indian Constitution. Yes, women have a right to live with human dignity. And this one is, we are also having right to equality. So exception under this Article 375 of this IPC code, which mainly discriminates with a wife when it comes to protection from rape. So from protection from rape, women do not have this right. Under this section 375, it is having exception. And next one is, marital rape mainly violates right to life with dignity of a woman. Okay, so due to this exception under this section 375 subclass 2 of IPC. So this is about constitutional provisions. And now let us try to talk about why we are not criminalizing marital rape. So what are the reasons? So first one here is, so mainstream perception is that marriage with a woman, okay, whenever man marries woman, so this marriage gives husband consent, okay, which mainly gives husbands constant consent, okay. So this marriage as an institution which itself give consent for sexual intercourse. So why we need to take a separate consent from women to involve in this activity? So this is the one thing which mainly said by mainstream people. And women, therefore, they end up being perceived as a baby making machines, where their right to bodily autonomy and as well as reproductive rights, they are inconceivable and as well as preposterous. So here, because of this, so many people they will say that, so with this marriage only, women they need to give a constant consent for her husband to mainly to participate in this sexual intercourse. So here women, therefore they are not having, okay, any right here, okay. So women are being perceived as a baby making machines. And next one is, if you are talking about arguments against criminalization of marital rape, so first thing you need to remember here is, due to near impossibility of proving marital rape, its criminalization would only serve as an increased burden on already overburdened legal system. So here it says that here there is no impossibility of proving. So yes, women they cannot prove that there is a marital rape. So because of this, if you are making a criminal thing, okay, criminal offense, or if you are making this marital rape as a criminalization, so it will lead to increase in the burden of cases in courts. So this is the first argument. And sometimes women who are dissatisfied and angry and vengeful wives, they might also charge innocent husbands on this case, okay. So this is the first important thing. And next one is, there is an implied consent to have sexual intercourse when woman marries a man. So with this marriage here, so women already gave consent, right? So why we need to take extra consent? So this is also one important area. And marital rape laws that would destroy many marriages by preventing any possible reconciliation. So this is also cause of concern. Okay, and now let us try to see infographic. I saw this infographic, it is very, very useful. And title of this infographic mainly says that when rape is allowed by law. So when rape is allowed by law, more than 2/3 of married women in India who are aged between 15 to 49 years, they have been beaten or forced to provide sex regardless of their socio-economic position. So it is as per United Nations Population Fund report. And next one is, for every 5 men, that is 1 in 5 men, they has forced his wife or partner to have sex. So this is according to International Men and Gender Equality Survey 2011. So if you see according to this data, so you can say if we make this as a criminalized thing, so most of the men, they will be sitting in a jail itself, right? And who will take care of their families? So this is the one thing you need to remember. And next one is over 104 countries across the world, they have criminalized this marital rape. Over 104 countries. And next one is India, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan and China, they have not criminalized. So these are some important facts that you need to remember. And let me know your suggestions in comment box for sure. And now let us move on to next topic. A title says India is indeed walking the green talk. So it is about NDC, Nationally Determined Contributions. And we are going to see this article in a very great detail. So actually many points which are given here, not important much. And whatever which is important from UPSC point of view, we are going to discuss. So this article will be important from our environment and ecology, which comes under GS paper 3. So why this type of environmental related articles is in news? Because of COP26, okay, Conference of Parties 26, that it is going to be held in Glasgow. So if you're talking about central theme, it mainly says that even with all its challenges, the country is setting a global example in meeting nationally determined contributions. So this article mainly is saying that it is mainly appreciating what are the steps which are taken by India mainly to achieve this nationally determined contributions while comparing with other countries. That's it. So even with all its challenges, even the country which is facing many challenges regarding economic slowdown due to COVID-19 pandemic, increase in number of deaths, and here we are also fearing about third wave of coronavirus. And even each and every sector has been affected badly due to this COVID-19. So even though we are facing many challenges, here India, which is mainly setting a goal, okay, setting a global example in meeting this nationally determined contribution, it is one of appreciation for India. So now let us try to talk about what is this nationally determined contributions. To know about this nationally determined contributions, we need to go back to Paris Climate Deal. So under this Paris Climate Deal, it is a legally binding international treaty, and this treaty which is related to climate change. And this Paris Climate Deal, which mainly adopted by 196 parties at Conference of Parties 21, which held in Paris. So name here which got Paris Climate Deal or Paris Agreement. And it enforced, okay, it entered into force on 4th November 2016. And what is the goal of this Paris Climate Deal? And the goal, it is to limit global warming. So we need to limit this global warming which is below 2 degrees, okay, 2 degrees, which is preferably, okay, and preferable it is 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to that of pre-industrial levels. And here this Paris Climate Deal, which mainly talking to achieve long-term temperature goal, okay, countries aim it is to reach global peaking of greenhouse gas emission as soon as possible, mainly to achieve climate neutral. So due to increase in number of emissions of carbon dioxide and due to increase in greenhouse gases, that led to global warming and climate change. And we are also facing devastations of climate change throughout the world. Mainly to prevent or mainly to decrease the impact of this climate change, we need to take some steps. And these steps cannot be taken by India or China, but all together, all countries together. So if you're talking about this NDCs, that is nationally determined contributions, so countries, they mainly communicate their actions. So what is the thing which mainly done by so and so country? So that will be measured, right? So that will be measured mainly through this nationally determined contributions. So countries, they mainly communicate actions they will take to reduce their greenhouse emissions. So what are the things, what are the actions they are mainly taking, that will come under this nationally determined contributions. So these are mainly declared by those so and so countries, and also they will mainly declare this in order to reach the goals of Paris Agreement. And next one is countries, they also communicate in NDC actions, nationally determined contributions actions, and they will take to build resilience to adapt to its impacts of rising temperatures. And if you're talking about India's commitments, so what are these India's NDCs? So first one here is we need to improve emissions intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030. Okay, so we are mainly going to improve. Okay, we are going to improve our emissions targets. Okay, emissions target intensity of its GDP by, we are going to achieve this 33 to 35% of emissions intensity. And this one is we need to increase our share of non-fossil fuels. That means we are going to move towards renewable energy targets by 40%, but is by 2030. This is target year. And next one is we are also focusing to increase forest cover, that is afforestation, and that will absorb mainly 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So these are NDCs of India. So if you are talking about some important data which is given in this article, it mainly says that if you are talking about this World Bank data for carbon dioxide emissions, okay, so according to World Bank data for carbon dioxide emissions, so over 2 decades, that is over 20 years since Kyoto Protocol informs at the current rate. So here according to this data, it mainly says that China and USA, they could emit 5 times more than how much amount of emissions are released by in India by 2030, and UK emissions level will be 1.5 times more compared to that of India's emissions. And in Brazil, so we have Amazon forest. So this Amazon forest, which is mainly cut down, and as well as we are experiencing many forest fires in this Amazon region. So with its dense forest, it may end up at the similar levels. Okay, Brazil also, which mainly could emit more than 1.5 times of emissions which is emitted by India. And China, it is the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, which made a joint race to achieve net neutrality or net zero by 2060. It is a target of China. And now let us try to talk about what are the steps taken by India to achieve this NDCs. So first one is India is implementing one of the most extensive renewable energy expansion program, and we are mainly going to achieve 175 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity that will be done by 2030. And to achieve this, we came with number of floating solar parks also, right? So even in our yesterday's PIB, we studied about NTPC came up with a large floating solar park, right? That is in Simhadri. And next one is government announced several green measures including $26.5 billion investment in biogas. We are also investing in biogas and also cleaner fuels like green hydrogen, and also $3.5 billion in incentives for producing efficient solar photovoltaic panels, that is PV panels. And also we are focusing on chemistry cell batteries, and also $780 million towards afforestation program. So these are the steps that are taken by India. And next one is India provided leadership for setting up of International Solar Alliance, that is ISA. So this ISA is a coalition of solar resource rich countries, and also we came with coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure and partnership governments. It is a partnership of governments. And also we came with United Nations agencies and as well as multilateral developmental banks, and we also came with collaboration with the private sector and also knowledge institutions. So in this way, we are mainly making some improvements mainly to achieve our nationally determined contributions. Okay, so this is just of this topic, and I hope it is clear. Now let us try to see next topic. So before saying this topic, I want to make a small announcement on this platform. If you want to clear UPSC 2022, we came up with one excellent, highly beneficial and also highly economical course, that is current affairs package along with mains answer writing practice. So how this course will be useful to clear this UPSC 2022? So one thing you need to remember here is before entering into examination hall, you need to know at least 1.5 years current affairs, and this is right time to join this course to cover this 1.5 years current affairs in a comprehensive manner. And here we are mainly focusing on mains answer writing practice. So why you need to focus on this mains answer writing practice? Because in mains exam you will be having just 3 hours of time and you need to answer 20 questions. So overall you will be getting 7 to 7.5 minutes for one question. So to write or to answer all these 20 questions within the time limit, so you need to have a good practice. So if you join this course, you will be writing more than 300 questions and also you will be practicing more than 50 essays. So in this way, this course will give you enough practice to answer 20 questions within a time limit. And if you join this course, we also conduct prelims test on every Sunday and we provide you video explanation part. So in this way, this course which is designed as per demand of UPSC. So finally, I want to say one thing. Please don't take this course as a choice. Try to join this course as soon as possible and achieve your dream of clearing UPSC. So details of this course which is given in description box. So please visit that once. And if you want to talk to me directly, you can call to this number 8074765513. Okay. And now let's come back and let us see last topic of the day. Title says a monetization move that doesn't tick most boxes. So this article mainly focusing on some challenges of this national monetization pipeline. So if you see central theme, it mainly says that the national monetization pipeline may not help realize the best value for public assets to kickstart investment demand. Okay, so this mainly talking about challenges here. So though government came up with this national monetization program mainly to give lease here some areas to private sectors that will helpful for generation of income mainly to come out of this economic crisis caused by COVID-19. Okay, so here national monetization pipeline may not help to realize the best value for public assets and also to kick-start investment demand. So now let us try to see in detail regarding this topic. So now let us try to talk about what is asset monetization. Asset means property, right? So asset monetization is a process. So this will be mainly helpful for creating new sources of revenue. So it will create a new source of revenue for the government and this will be helpful for unlocking the economic value of unutilized and underutilized public assets. So if there is any, let us take a stadium. So in this stadium, in this area which is not utilized, okay, so it is not utilized but it is not creating any income for government. So this area will be given lease to private sector and they will come here and they will do some development and in return government will also getting money from this private sector if this area which is given on lease to this private sector. So one thing you need to remember here is, so under this program you are just giving lease but not transferring of ownership like privatization. We are not going for privatization here, just we are giving so and so underutilized and as well as unutilized areas for this private sector on lease. Okay, internationally it is mainly recognized that public assets, they are the significant resources for all economies. So if you are giving on this lease, that will be helpful for overall development of our economy also. And if you are talking about objectives and needs of this national monetization pipeline, so the global pandemic which mainly led to economic crisis, right? So due to this economic crisis, so here we are mainly facing money crunch, right? So there is also increasing spending on another side, mainly for developing of plants for oxygen. Okay, and we also imported number of oxygen containers from other countries and we also invested much in development of vaccines. Right, and we also government also provided healthcare benefits and also it improved hospital facilities in many ways and it is also providing vaccinations, right? So in this way, on one side there is increasing expenditure and on another side there is decreasing revenue. So because of this, now we are facing this economic crunch or economic crisis, and here this type of programs will be very much helpful mainly to recover some amount of money and that will be helped to at least to come some extent out of this economic crisis. So thus here the total expenditure of the government has been jumped and the revenue has been decreased or shrinking. So it led to huge rise in borrowings. So on borrowings here government need to pay again interest, right? So government found that monetization of government and public sector owned asset. So this will be very important and it is one of the option which mainly present for infrastructure construction in our country. So if you see context, government launched this national monetization pipeline. So under this national monetization pipeline, so it is mainly focused to sell public assets or more precisely their revenue streams in over next 4 years. So next 4 years they are going to they are going to mainly sell this public assets. And here this pipeline mostly includes railway stations, freight corridors, airports, renovated national highway segments, and they will get about rupees 6 lakh crore or 3% of GDP in 2020 to 21. So the other two methods of raising resources, they include setting up of development finance institutions, and as well as another way here is to raise the share of infrastructure investment in central and as well as state budgets. So in this other ways also we can get some resources. So if you're talking about challenges of this national monetization pipeline, so first one is there is lack of identifiable revenue streams in various assets. For example, today the value of so and so area is, let us take rupees 1000. It is a just example, and we can't know that how much price that will be, that this area will be increased by 5 years. So it may be like 10,000 or it may be like 50,000. We can't expect it. And next one is there is low level of capacity utilization in some sectors like gas and petroleum pipeline networks. So in this way we can't expect much investments. And there is also regulated tariffs in power sector assets, and there is low interest which is mainly shown by investors in this national highways which are below 4 lanes. And next one is, for example, in Konkan Railway, for example, it has multiple stakeholders which mainly include state governments which have their own stake in entity. So how can we deal whether in these areas, like whether the state government is also having a stake here, whether the state government will accept or not. And here next important problem here is there is failure to address some structural problems in our sector, in sectors. For example, here this national monetization pipeline which also does not address the various structural problems in our Indian economy like legal uncertainty around such programs and as well as absence of deep bond market, etc. And there is also doubt over private sector involvement here. So whether they are involving only in these brownfield projects or whether they will demand for greenfield projects. And also there is some impact on end consumer. So whenever private players are taking lease here and they are going for development wheels, so they will also increase the cost, like right. So because of this, that will lead to high prices on end consumers also. So here what is the way forward? What can be done? So first one is we need a proper execution. So while the government has tried to address many challenges, so here infrastructure development in this NMP framework execution, that need to be the one of important key for the success. And we need to have a proper dispute resolution mechanism. So if there is any dispute between the private players and government is happening, we need a proper dispute redressal mechanism. And next one is we need a multi-stakeholder approach, only between government or private, but not that thing. So here when we want to go for this infrastructure expansion plan, so we need to depend on different stakeholders like even state government, even we can also talk about central government and private players, and even state government, they need to be involved. So we need a multi-stakeholder approach. So this is the gist of this topic. So I hope it is clear now. So by this we are concluding today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like, share and comment my videos. And don't forget to enroll to this current affairs package. Thank you so much.